Today is March 15th at 6:22 a.m. Eastern time on the East Coast. And today is the day that the federal judge in Texas is holding a hearing about the abortion pill, which will absolutely impact and shape the lives in the future moving forward for half the country. So we're going to take a look at the chart and see if we can figure out which way this frog is going to jump. So also to remember, with astrology, one of the most compelling things about it is the ability, when we get it right, to predict which direction a frog jumps given stimulus A, B, or C. Will it jump in X, Y, or Z direction? And how high? So, that is where astrology gets complicated and not so easy to replicate, which is why not everybody does this or does it accurately. So let's take a look at the chart and see what we might expect before the day is over. Alrighty, so here's the chart for the hearing in Texas. As they're telling us, it started at 9 a.m. So it's supposed to run for 4 hours. Starts at 9, should be over by noon today. The ascendant on this chart is 17 Aries. The ruler for the chart or the event is Mars. Mars is at 25 Gemini in the third house. The third house and the ninth house represent courts and the legal system, I suppose. So the third house always represents the lower courts. The ninth house always represents the higher courts. So this would be the lower federal court, and above them is the Supreme Court. Mars rules the event. Mars is at 25 Gemini. Mars is still out of bounds. So the overreach that we have been experiencing and watching with a lot of things, in particular men, and things that have to do with aggressive action, is still in place at this time. Now, what's notable about this event, right, is if you look, we have a giant T-square happening right here. We've got Sun, Neptune, and Mercury all clustered together around the 24th, 22, 24, and 25 degrees of Pisces. And it is squaring an exact square to this Mars, which rules the chart. Right here suggests that there is conflict or issues and pressure coming from this placement and the event. Now, the moon sets up a T-square here. The moon is moving out of the T-square, and here's what's intriguing about today's event. Prior, or just before today, the moon would have been in late Sagittarius, and it would have set up a tight and exact T-square with Sun, Mercury, Neptune, and Mars. So it having just moved into Sagittarius, it takes a lot of that pressure off. Something has changed. Something has changed. Circumstances have changed that we may not be privy to. Because it sits in the ninth house as part of this T-square, there may be a move to try and bounce this case up to the Supreme Court. So I don't know how that works, because obviously I'm not a lawyer, but this looks like this is going to be a very strategic maneuver to get the lower court judge or the federal judge in Texas out of the responsibility of giving the decision on this, and somehow or another he's going to manage to bump this up to a higher court so that they can take responsibility for this mess rather than him. Now, here's the thing, right? So before I get into the other stuff, with the Sun, Neptune, and Mercury conjunction right here as the leg or the trigger of the gun, right, in this T-square, this is very, very telling. Sun and Neptune in and of itself, and also with Mercury there, this has a lot to do with, I hate to say it, but possibly some delusional thinking or some ideological thinking, very narrow, looking through a tube kind of perspectives, and it's coming out of the 12th house, right? So the 12th house is always things going on behind the scenes, things that you can't see, and it also rules religious organizations and spiritual people, or people who think that they're spiritual. I can take you to any mental institution anywhere and find you about a half a dozen people who think they're Jesus. So, being spiritual and living spiritual principles are not necessarily the same thing. You can believe yourself to be spiritual and absolutely not. Okay, so this suggests, because remember, this moon has just changed signs. So prior to today, when that moon was actively involved in this horrible T-square, this suggests that these parties, and the sun also represents authority figures, okay, so, and men, these parties who represent these particular types of factions, right, these self identified, self-absorbed, myopic, it's all about me and what I believe kind of thing, would have been putting tremendous pressure on, remember, this is the event, tremendous pressure on the outcome of this event. Something has changed in this time. So we've got some, I'm hoping we've got good surprises coming out of this, but we definitely have some surprises coming out of this. So whatever hold these parties behind the scenes had, it's not there anymore. It's not there. Their grasp has been loosened, as it were. Now, some of the other things that we can look at to possibly get an idea which way this frog is going to jump is by looking at the 10th house. The 10th house rules the ultimate authority in a situation. In this case, it's the judge. So whenever you're looking at court cases in these types of charts, your 10th house is going to describe the judge. Now, here's what's interesting. Look over here. Saturn rules Capricorn, and Saturn also has just changed signs. So we still have we have the moon changing signs, but the moon has slipped into Capricorn. Saturn has moved into Pisces, so now they are in supportive aspect with each other. So again, I think there's some type of maneuver going on here that's going to get this judge out of the hot seat and put the responsibility on a higher court. With Saturn having just changed signs, again, something has changed. Something in the circumstances around this case and specific to the judge has changed. So it is possible, my friends, that he may have had a change of heart. He is a Trump-appointed Republican judge or a Trump-appointed judge, which means that he was selected for his judgeship specifically for his anti-abortion positions, because the evangelicals backed the Trump administration all the way through, and that has been their only goal and purpose, literally to the point of overlooking everything else the administration is doing that is unholy and evil and wrong. They don't care. Their one mission was to vindicate themselves and get anti-abortion pushed through. They're almost successful with it. We're not done yet. So don't panic and despair, but at the same time, also don't close your eyes and rest on your laurels thinking that this is it and you're just going to have to give up and resign yourself. We're not done with this fight yet. And with Saturn having changed the signs, it means that the judge, there's something in the background in his specific experience or perception that has changed. So circumstances have changed for him as well. Now, we're going to come back to that, but that's interesting things to see in the chart. All right. Now, when you look at the ascendant, we've got 17 Aries rising. We have Jupiter and Vesta and Chiron all conjunct this first house or the ascendant. This is very, very important. Jupiter and Vesta together on the ascendant are extremely critical. Vesta is the goddess for the Vestal Virgins, and Vesta has everything to do with reproductive rights, okay, and women's bodies and women's health and things that are exclusive to the female experience. Vesta and Jupiter together would suggest that there is some protection around that. So we may find that there are more operators here that are just as supportive and protective of women's rights than may be obvious. And remember, this sits in the 12th house or behind the scenes, so those people may not be as obvious or full face on camera, but they're there. They are there. Chiron also conjuncts Jupiter and Vesta. This suggests that there's going to be some discussion or some consideration involved that have a lot to do with birth defects and birth issues and unsustainable births. There's going to be a whole lot going on here that's above and beyond this very simplistic toddler thinking, that, if an egg and a sperm come together, it's a baby. It's more complicated than that. And this has a lot to do with medicine and science and public health and public community issues. So there's more going on here, and this is all very protective. So just based on this and crossing my fingers, I'm hoping that what this means is that the change of heart that we see with the judge, or the change of circumstances that is supporting the public and also supporting a possible maneuver to get this out of his court and make somebody else responsible for this, is a result of also becoming more aware of how this impacts, people at large, as opposed to, the little fantasy island some people live on. Because, we're pro-life, but we support the death penalty if you get an abortion because we're pro-life. Oh my God. Yeah, that's going on in South Carolina right now too. Okay, so let's take a look at this judge again, because this is really what we're worried about, right? Which way is this frog going to jump? So Saturn is the judge. Saturn makes a sextile to the moon. This is good. It means that there's a measured, less impulsive, less emotionally wound up response to the situation. We're good with that. Saturn, his ruler, is also making an out of sign sextile to Venus. Okay, so it was sextiling Venus, and it still is. It's just changed signs. So there is some sympathy, at least the way this looks. There is some sympathy for women and to women in his thinking. So with this changing signs, this may be the thing that finally pushed him over to make a decision that may be completely unexpected to some people. Juno rules married women and marriages and home, family, and hearth. Juno is conjunct the North Node. They are absolutely trining, sorry, trying to read my chart, trining the moon. So this would also suggest, and this is very important, that issues of reproductive rights for married people as well as non-married people, but families as a whole concept, not just man, woman, child, but man, woman, child, grandparents, children, nieces, nephews, people who share our households and our communities with us. This is going to be very well supported. Now, with the North Node here, one of the things you want to consider is that this is something that affects the masses. So again, obviously, this is definitely something affecting the masses. Saturn makes a sextile to Juno and the North Node, suggesting that this is a supportive, positive position the judge is now in that he was not before. Because remember, something has changed with him. So there's that. I could be wrong. I'm being very optimistic here, but I'm thinking that we may very well get out of this in a way where the judge does not support a national abortion pill ban. Okay, so his heart may have turned, and he may actually side, on the side of women and families and, concerns and considerations above and beyond fantasy island thinking. So, if that turns out to be true, we're going to find out this afternoon, how close we are to getting this correct, looking at the chart. And again, my big caveat and my big caveat and disclaimer here is that these are new ways of looking at charts, and certainly new for me. So, I could possibly get it wrong. We're learning. This is a learning activity for me as well as you. All right. So if this is correct, and this is what happens, and he does not put a ban on the sale of, the abortion pills, abortifacient is the medical term. And it's largely a result of some type of circumstance or situation changing. Something turned his heart in his personal life. And even if he was supportive of women before, there's less pressure on him to make decisions he's not comfortable with, which will result in him not pushing a ban and also finding a way to maneuver or bump this into the higher court and make them take responsibility for it, which unfortunately also means that we're not done yet. If that is the case, what I would suggest also is that even though there are forces behind the scenes that were really putting the screws to the judge, to try and make this event happen the way they want it to, and obviously that's not the way it's going to go now. It may be, on the judge's end, it may have to do with children and cousins and nieces. So this may very well be something that has happened or has been revealed to him inside his family that absolutely involves family members, that has forced him to really reconsider and understand the magnitude of what's at stake here and how important the availability of safe reproductive control methods are. So that may be it. We will see. We will see. Now, the last thing I just want to add in here, if you use the modern planets, Pluto is right here, conjunct the part of fortune. Pluto, again, is at the very last degree and the last minutes of its sign. Everything is getting ready to change. So this judge also, interestingly, this may be that this judge is looking at retiring soon. And this may be why he's now found the freedom to make a decision he wouldn't have made prior to now. We don't know. We're going to find out. But yeah, certainly some major big changes on his end. So let's watch this space and see what happens with the court and their decision today.